Hi there, I'm Andrea Maranville, Sweet Life of a Baker and owner of Silver City Baking Company. And I'm really excited to be here today at Gerhard's Equipment, restaurant, kitchen store. I mean, this is an amazing facility. I mean, look at this place. I mean, who wouldn't want to bake in this kitchen? So I'm really excited today because today I'm going to be sharing with you my hot milk sponge cake. Now, this cake is super light, super spongy. It has a tight crumb, but it is definitely something that can be so versatile in so many ways. It can be soaked with different flavors, it can be made into a cake, and can be just so versatile. So I'm really excited to share with you because it's got very simple ingredients. The method may be a little different than from what you're used to with cake, like the creaming method where you cream butter and sugar in the beginning. This is a totally different method. The reason they call it a hot milk cake is I'm literally going to take milk and I'm going to put it in a sauce pot and I'm going to warm it up with some butter. So first and foremost, what do I do whenever I make a cake? Whenever I bake a cake, I always prepare my baking pans first, because the last thing I want to do is get done with the entire recipe and say, oh, I got to prepare the pan liners. So how do I do that? Certainly if you're at home and you don't have parchment paper and you're in a pinch, you can butter and flour your cake pans. But it makes it much easier for cake to release from a cake pan if you use parchment paper. I only put it at the bottom, so I'm going to show you really quickly what I would do. So whenever I make my rounds, I take my cake round, I take a marker or a pen, and I go right around the pan. And then you just cut within the round. And then what it's going to do is going to give you a really great fit for the bottom of that pan. You definitely want to cut inside the marker. You don't want to have any sort of a marker or anything at the bottom of your cake pan. But you're going to go ahead and you're going to use some sort of a pan spray. This is a really great one. You're going to get the sides really, really well. You're going to put the parchment paper right at the bottom, and then you're going to line it again and set it aside. Now, I've already gone ahead and done the other pans just for ease of time, but definitely now that you want to do that at the very beginning, because that's going to allow you to then not have to deal with that again. So what do I have as elements in this cake recipe? I have all-purpose flour, baking powder, salt, eggs, sugar, and vanilla extract, and vanilla bean only because I love how the little flecks of vanilla beans show up in this cake, because it's more of a white cake and it really pops when you see that and you cut into it and you see those little flecks of vanilla bean. Plus, I'm a huge vanilla fan. So I'm going to go ahead real quickly and I will sift and measure. I've already measured, but I'll sift the dry ingredients into a bowl and set it aside. Why do we sift? For a couple of reasons. A, you want to aerate all of your dry ingredients, but also if I were to go ahead and put each of the ingredients into this bowl and then mix, you're going to have pockets. It's not going to be fully incorporated. So I'm going to go ahead and I've got 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder. That's one element of the lift in this cake. So the baking powder is what's going to allow this cake to rise. And then I have a half a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to go ahead and give that a really great sift, just right into a bowl, and just set it aside till I'm ready for it. So I just said what one of the lifts are in this cake. I'm going to show you what the other lift is in a second. All right, okay, we'll just set that right aside. So the other lift in this cake is going to be these eggs. I've got 4 whole large eggs here. I'm going to put them right into my KitchenAid mixer with a paddle attachment. And then I have 1 cup and 3/4 of granulated pure cane sugar. That's going to go right into this mixture. Now, in a second, I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it on medium to high speed, and I'm going to let this mixer go for about 5 minutes. And what's going to happen is that egg and sugar mixture is going to transform into this really, really light, pale, cream-colored, thick mixture. And that is going to be the air also in this cake. So what we're doing is we're whipping air into those eggs, and it's going to really create some nice volume in the cake. Okay? If you wanted to get even more, technical and get even more volume, you could heat, very, very lightly heat in a double boiler over the stove your eggs and your sugar just until the granules are dissolved, almost like a Swiss meringue. But for our purposes here, we can just go right ahead in the mixer. So let's get talking about the hot milk. I have 4 ounces of unsalted butter here. You really in baking want to use unsalted butter because then you can temper the salt content in your cake so much better. If you were to only use salted butter in your home, you're going to want to omit the salt in a recipe because otherwise you're going to double up on the salt it's going to affect the taste and the quality of your baked goods. So like I said here, I've got 4 ounces of unsalted butter, which is about a half a cup. Now, as you can see this, if you have forgotten to bring your butter to room temperature for whatever reason, and you have a stick of butter like this, right here has 6 surface areas to allow that to come to temperature. A really great trick to bring never put in the microwave. You never want to put butter in a microwave to bring it to room temperature. But what you can do is you can go ahead and chunk up that butter into smaller chunks. Now, each one of these squares has 6 surface areas, and it allows that butter to come to temperature much quicker. Now, for this recipe, we're actually not using room temperature butter. We're going to be using melted butter. So it's really not essential to do this step, but because we're going to be melting it. But for most cakes that do require room temperature butter, this is definitely something you're going to want to do. I'm going to go ahead and put these 4 ounces right into this sauce pot. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this milk. I've got 1 cup of milk. I'm going to put this right in the sauce pot and turn it right on the stove. Now, you're definitely not looking to make this milk boil. All you're doing is heating the milk, melting the butter, and getting it warmed through. So you definitely don't want to get a raging boil on this milk. Now, I'm going to go ahead, because while this is melting, I'm going to start my egg and sugar mixture. Start slow, that way you don't get things flying out of your mixer, and then very slowly just start speeding it up. In the beginning, it's going to look dark yellow, and as this mixes for a good 4 to 5 minutes, it's going to totally transform in its texture and its color, and I'll show you in a couple minutes how that's going to look. Now, I also have vanilla here. I love vanilla, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this right in with my mixture as well. That's the other thing when you're baking. I could have skipped the vanilla and used an imitation vanilla, but the quality of the ingredients that you use are definitely going to impact your baking at the final product. I mean, you don't have to use the most expensive flour or the most expensive, butter or the most expensive vanilla, but you really want to use as many natural and good and quality ingredients as you possibly can. So I've got my flour here. So now you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but it's really starting to thicken up. It's starting to get really pale in color, and that's what you want. That's the volume. So if, for example, I did not have baking powder in this cake, which a lot of traditional, like some other cakes don't, all they go off is by the air in your eggs. This is a really great method to help you get lift in that cake. All right, so my milk is warmed through. My butter's not totally melted, but that's okay because the heat from that milk is going to continue to melt that butter. Now, this is a great cake because let's just say you wanted to make a lemon hot milk cake or a rum hot milk cake. What you could do is you could take this measurement of milk, take out a few tablespoons of it, and replace it with whatever flavor you're looking for. So let's just say you want an element of a really great rum, right? What you would do is you would take about 3 or 4 tablespoons of the milk and then replace it with the rum. You don't want to add more liquid because that's going to change the makeup and the chemistry, so to speak, of the recipe. But as long as you're within this measurement of 1 cup, you could substitute a portion of this for just about any flavor. All right, this is looking really great, nice and thick. I've got my prepared pans all ready to go. Now, before I did anything, I preheated my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So you always want to preheat your oven well ahead of time so that you can get a really nice heat in that oven. The last thing you want to do is not have pans done and go to put something in the oven and then all of a sudden you realize you didn't turn the oven on. So those are the first 2 things I always do whenever I'm baking. Prepare the pans and take care of the oven. All right, so I just want to show everybody what this is starting to look like. Now, a good rule of thumb when you're doing this is if you take your container and you drag your mixer and you go back and forth, you're going to see trails start to develop. This is what we're looking for. So you can see how thick and pale and white it is, but you can also see those really great flecks of vanilla bean in there. I'm going to put this right back on the mixer. So what's the next step in this method? I'm going to add half of my dry mixture. Very slowly mix it. I don't want to whisk it so much or mix it so much that I deflate all that air I just created. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in about half of this dry mixture. The other thing too, whenever you're making cake, to get that really tender crumb, you don't want to over mix your batter. The more you mix, the tighter that structure is going to be in the cake. So I want to make sure that when I mix this in, I mix it just till it's barely combined and then go to the next step. And that goes for any cake or cookie. You really want to have it, to get that really nice tender crumb, you really want to have as least of a mixture as you possibly can. And whenever I bake, I'm always scraping down my bowls. So you'll notice whenever I go through and I go to incorporate something else, I scrape down. And what that's doing is that's allowing all those ingredients on the sides to fully incorporate into the cake. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of the dry mixture. Try not to make a mess. That's what I'm known to do once or twice. I never made a chocolate cake that didn't get the best of me, or my counter, or my clothes. So I'm just mixing that dry ingredients on super low speed, as you can see, just until it incorporates. Okay? I just want to see it so I don't see any trails of flour. Now it's super thick right now, right? So what am I going to do next? I'm going to scrape down one more time, and I'm going to very slowly add my hot milk mixture into this cake batter. It's going to be so good, you guys. This is one of my favorite cakes to make. Now, all I'm looking for is to have that it looks cohesive. Again, I'm not trying to overmix the cake batter. All I want to do is incorporate that melted butter and that milk into the mixture. And I think that's about it. All right, I will once more scrape along the side. It's going to go right into my cake pans. Now I have 3 6-inch cake pans here. This recipe does, 2 10-inch, more than 2 8-inch, 3 8-inch. But this is, you want to go with cakes, you want to go about halfway, no more than 2/3 up a cake pan. So we'll see how far this gets me. I think we'll just stick with the 2 6-inch. Get some nice thick cake in here. Now this cake is going to bake for about 30 to 35 minutes in the oven. Okay, so let's talk about this. Sometimes with cakes, you want to tap them down on the counter. Not with a cake like this. I mean, it does have baking powder in it, so I don't have to worry about it too much. But if you see some really big bubbles, you just want to give it a very, very light tap, but not too much that you deflate what you just created with all the eggs, okay? Another really great trick when you're doing your cake pans, if you give it a spin on the counter before it goes into the oven, that helps avoid that dome. So it kind of helps level off your cake a little bit. You might still get a little bit of a dome, but just give it a little bit of a spin, pop it in the oven, middle of the oven, and you definitely want to have space in between both of these cake pans. All right, and that's it. So in about 35 minutes, I am going to pull these out, and we'll see how they look. Nice and golden brown on top. A really great way to test it if you don't want to do the toothpick method. If you have a digital thermometer and you go right into the center of the cake, anywhere between 2 and 210 degrees Fahrenheit is a really good indicator that your cake is done. If it's over 210, you have overbaked your cake. It still tastes good, I mean it's cake. But if you're looking for that really great, how do I know when it's done moment, anywhere between 2 and 210 is a really great measure. Okay, so this cake, one of the cakes are done. The other one had a touch more batter in it, so it's a little bit longer. So what am I looking for also, aside from the golden top and the temperature? If you don't have a thermometer, you can always do the spring touch, go like this if it bounces back. But another really good indicator is if it pulls away from the side of the pan. So you can see here, if you get a really close up, what it's done is it's pulled away from the edge of the pan. Now I don't want to release this from the pan for about 10 minutes. Why is that? Because this cake has done so much sciencey stuff inside that oven to really combine all the drying, the wet, and the fats, and all of those items. Again, very sciencey culinary terms, but I'm a home baker, so let's just be real here. We're going to let this sit here for about 10 minutes, okay? Then I'm going to release it from the pan, and then I'm going to allow it to cool completely. I don't want to touch this for about 10 minutes. Otherwise, I run the risk of the cake just falling apart.